Tamurkhan the Maggot Lord is hitting Warhammer 3 and bringing a lot of friends along with him. When playing as him, you'll be unlocking chieftains from all corners of the Chaos family tree and increasing their fealty to stock your armies with units never before seen on the Nurgle roster. But how does all this work in game? Let's dive in and find out. As always, let's start with his campaign mechanics. He still makes use of the plagues and cyclical buildings from the base Nurgle race, and if you want more details on these newly reworked mechanics, then check out my video on the Nurgle rework. As for his unique mechanics, he has Chieftains. This allows Tamurkhan to recruit various unique heroes and unlock abilities and units he can't get anywhere else as he builds their allegiance to his warband. You recruit these heroes with dominance, which is earned mainly through winning battles as well as certain events and choices. Once you have enough, you head to the Chieftains menu and choose a hero to recruit. To start off with, you just have Kaisk the Befouled, but once you have him aligned, the rest will open up. Each of these heroes come with their own unique effects for your army, items, abilities in battle, and methods through which you can increase their fealty. This has 4 tiers and you'll need to perform these specified actions a certain number of times to rise through the ranks. Each tier also comes with its own abilities and units, giving you all kinds of unique bonuses to the heroes themselves and the faction in general. Once unlocked, these units and any abilities will have to be bought with dominance, so you'll want to make sure you have plenty in stock to use everything that you earn. I won't go through every effect of every hero because it's a lot of reading of things that you can see yourself, but aside from Kaisk from Nurgle, you have Kargan from the Warriors of Chaos, Ketzak from the Balefiends of Norsca, Mornhal from the other beasties of Norsca, Grukmer from the Beastmen, and Izar from the Chaos Dwarves. I will, however, go over them in battle and their skill trees. Kaisk the Befouled is always on his Rock Beast, so is a powerful charging lord. He has melee stats which are decent and the charge bonus is really high, so cycle charging is the way to go for maximum damage. Add on armor piercing, anti-infantry poison damage, and charging infantry is a must to get the most out of this guy. Having worked with some other Rot Knights since they match his speed and choice of mounts, and they'll go to work. He can be in sustained combat, but just know you're going to believe in both damage and survivability on the table. As for his skill tree, he's a campaign assassin and a cavalry leader battling lord. His faster and harder line has buffs for all mounted units in the army, and the Blade Master is standard combat buffs. Body mass makes him better at every aspect of battle and plague buffs, and he gains the Befouled charge ability from Ultimate Riders. Lastly, Twisted by Nurgle grants him some attrition and corruption buffs. Kargan the Crazed has more HP than your regular Exalted hero, less attack but more defense, as well as a bonus versus infantry. He still wants to be in the front lines fighting wherever he can get close to, just focus on less armor tags to start off with to make sure his damage is getting through. As for his mounting options, he has a Chaos Steed which grants him more HP, armor, speed and charge. He can do the same job but now be anywhere on the map. Just be careful of getting in too deep and getting surrounded. He has the Chaos Chariot which drops his melee stats and armor to gain lots more charge bonus. This makes him into a charging lord that should not sit in combat with that large hitbox and low defense. And finally the Chaos Dragon. He of course gains a fast fly mount, great armor piercing damage, tons of HP, just your standard dragon gameplay. Fly around breathing on whatever you can see and fight anything that you want. Just be careful of ranged focus with that large hitbox. As for his skill tree, he's a campaign assassin and an exalted hero battler. He's slightly different from the basic hero. He's a different choice between attack, leadership aura and replenishment, and another choice between damage and leadership aura a bit later on. And then the warband of the Craze line has army buffs focusing on Warriors of Chaos infantry units. Next up we have Ketzak Fimdaric, and he's a spellcaster with Lore of Shadows. He's very similar to the regular Fimir Balefiend. He has slightly improved armor and melee stats, making him very viable on the front lines. Use this and their spells to deal tons of damage to enemies, no matter how armored they are. Just be cautious when sending them in too far, since you really don't want to lose a caster to melee. As for his skill tree, he has very standard caster skills, as well as the From the Swamps line. This improves control and relations with Norsca. This buffs the Penumbral Pendulum ability cost and cooldown, as well as granting it as a bound spell. He also gains regen for most non-beast units in the army. We also have Mornhal. He gains improved HP and melee stats over a regular skin Wolf Werekin, but drops some weapon strength. He also swaps anti-large bonus for anti-infantry. This makes him into another frontlines fighter that can target anything you want with massive armor piercing damage. He also has great speed so he can get to whatever targets you need on the front lines or the back. As for the skill tree, he's a campaign assassin but a frontlines battler. Same choice between defense and attack, standard melee buff line, and the Skrael's Bane Nemesis line, which is unique to him, grants improved relations with Norsca, buffs all kinds of infantry and beasts in the army, as well as speed and vigor buffs. We have Grukmer Threehorn, who is a spellcaster with access to Lore of the Wild. He's functionally the same as a regular Bray Shaman, keep him out of combat and keep the cast coming to get your value. He gains a little bit of armor and magical damage, but that's not going to change much, so keep him well back. For his mounting options, he has the choice between a Tuskar or a Razorgore Chariot. Both of these make him a lot more usable in a very specific kind of combat. If you can handle the micro of cycle charging, then do it. But if not, then still keep them well clear of combat, as the larger hitboxes and low defense will spell disaster if they get caught in melee. Just use that high speed to get casts wherever they're needed. As for the skill tree, is a very standard caster skills, as well as the Calling All Mutants line, which improves relations with beastmen and growth in the faction, buffs to beast and monsters in the army, as well as the Flock of Doom bound spell. And lastly, Izar Doombolt. He gains melee stats, poisons both damage types, as well as missile strength over regular Infernal Castellans, but loses some range and ammo. Overall, he can still be used pretty much the same, just from a shorter distance. He has great range damage, so keep him there as much as you can. If he needs to get into melee, then he can do that just as well. As for his skill tree, very similar to the generic Infernal Castellan, so lots of range damage and buffs for himself, as well as the unique Prestige of Zana Grundline. This grants relations with Chaos Dwarves, buffs for Chaos Dwarves in the army, income buffs and ranged unit buffs. Buffs all round. Upon reaching max fealty to any of these heroes, you'll unlock a quest battle, and after winning, you'll unlock the final tier of fealty alongside some cash, infection, and dominance rewards. Aside from this, he also has his faction and lord effects. For his faction, he grants increased campaign movement range and recruitment health for all non-demonic units. For his own army, he grants increased attack and immunity to psychology for all non-demonic units. As for his starting location, victory conditions, and expansion options, he starts in the plains of Zanbaijin. His short victory conditions are completing 3 devoted chieftain battles and destroying Kolek, Grimgor Greasus, and their factions. After the starting war, you'll basically be on Kolek's doorstep, and taking him down now will stop him from being a lot stronger and harder to take out later, so try to catch him out of an ambush or just overwhelm him with numbers if you can't make him leave home. Once he's dealt with, all of your other targets are in the south, so heading down there and taking on every settlement you find is the way to go. It may be unpleasant climate conditions, but if you focus on income buildings, you can make it work. For me, this was a slow grind, moving through the mountains with no underways, but eventually I was able to take out both of them with one army full of the best units I could get my hands on. Picking up Lightning Strike was a good move to counter any wars or multi-stacks I came across, but aside from that, it was just a very slow, steady plod downwards. Bring a second army if you need the support, just make sure you can afford it since early Nurgle is still a little bit poor, and keep an eye on the north so Archeon doesn't come a-knocking. Honestly, with all the heroes from the Chieftains mechanic, I didn't really need much better units, so if you unlock all of them and then stack them into one army, you should be just fine. First up, we have Tamurkhan the Maggot Lord. He's a strong fighting lord with great melee stats and armor piercing and anti-large poison damage. He can fight basically anything and do great work, but focus large targets to make the most of that bonus if there's the option. He's pretty tough, but nothing crazy, so watch out for him taking too much damage as he's not the smallest hitbox. If he does happen to reach 0 HP, he'll get one last bounce back from his Feast of the Maggot Lord ability, but try not to let it come to that if you can. After his mounting options, he just has one, Bubalos the Toad Dragon. This grants him a lot more HP, increased speed, attack and weapon strength, but reduced defense and charge bonus. He can be used pretty much just the same, just now do more damage with a bonus versus infantry. Just be very careful of being surrounded or focused with missiles, as he really is a big target and he has that low defense. For his skill tree, he has a very standard bottom 3 rows for campaign, army and combat bonuses, as well as the reputed Son of Kurgan line. This grants him buffs to all non-demonic units, buffs to himself in combat, and general army buffs. We also have the new generic lords, the Chaos Lords of Nurgle. These are very similar to the regular Chaos Lords, but with the very classic Nurgle twist of more HP and defense, but less attack. Still keep them on the front lines, fighting whatever low armor threat they can get their hands on. For the mounting options, he has the Chaos Steed, which grants more speed and charge bonus, but less defense. Use them more for charging around and attacking back lines, as the hitbox and defense will do them no favors on the front lines. We also have the Chaos Chariot, which drops melee stats to gain charge bonus and speed. Use them for pure charging. Don't keep him in melee, as the large size and low defense will spell doom. If you can't handle charging, stick with the Steed for now. And finally, the Rot Beast. This is faster than the Steed with more attack and charge, and only a little bit less defense. This can be used for either charging or sustained combat. Charging is safe with the size, but against backlines, they'll do fine if you leave them fighting. As for the skill tree, they're very similar to the other Chaos Lords, standard bottom 3 rows, but also the unique Skullcrush line, which brings buffs to himself and Warriors of Chaos units, as well as Plague Marked and Decaying Brand for abilities and army buffs. The new generic hero is the Chaos Sorcerer of Nurgle, and these can come with the Law of Nurgle or the Law of Death. Again, very similar to the basic Chaos Sorcerer, but more HP and defense, but less attack and damage. Still, keep them on the backlines providing spell support rather than combat. They should survive okay, but the extra damage isn't worth the risk of them being taken out and losing your spell support. As for their mounting options, they have the Chaos Steed, which grants them more speed and charge bonus, but still, keep them well back. Use the speed to get spells where needed, but that's it. Maybe attack backlines if you really need it, but only when they're accompanied by allied units. We also have the Chaos War Shrine. This brings all the standard War Shrine stuff, like awful stats, but strong auras. Keep them on the backlines providing passive support to allies and avoid missile and melee focus from enemies. And lastly, we have the Rot Beast. This is the same as a Lord. Better attack and charge, but worse defense. They can attack backlines with charging if you want, but just keep them safe because spells are always your #1 priority. Lastly, for the skill tree, they have the standard bottom row and spell tree, rank 5 choices between melee, spell or tankiness buffs, and then rank 7 choices between army leadership and a damage aura, defense and a melee debuff aura, or army damage buffs and immunity to contact effects. Now for the units, first up the Pestigors. These are a faster, mid-game infantry alternative to Chaos Warriors and Plague Bearers. They're much faster and have better attack and armor piercing damage, but less armor and defense. So they're trading more damage for less defense, so if your army is lacking damage, they can be a good pickup. Speed isn't really enough to make them into flankers, but if they're all you've got, you can sandwich enemy front lines pretty well. They can also ambush well with Vanguard and Woodsman, so if you're looking to use them to flank, set them up before battle begins to make things easier. We have Plague Ogres, which are technically infantry, not monstrous infantry, but look at them. Let's be honest, they're monsters. Most summon to Iron Guts from the Ogre Kingdoms, so strong armor-piercing damage, low melee stats, and some decent armor and charge bonus. Not quite as fast, so Ogre charging will be a little bit harder. Use that high damage versus armored infantry, and use them alongside your own infantry to deal lots of damage and keep them safe. We also have great weapons Plague Ogres. These drop some attack to gain some defense and charge bonus, and swap the bonus versus infantry to bonus versus large. These are the same unit but better versus large, so use them to focus that. And that's pretty much it. Next up we have the Rot Knights. These are faster and hit harder than Chaos Knights. With these melee stats they can be used for cycle charging or sustained combat. Just don't let them get surrounded or focused with ranged, as they will still go down eventually. Otherwise, great armor piercing damage so can take on basically anything, plus regen, so anytime they get hit, they'll be growing it back in moments. We also have Bile Trolls. These make for a great alternative to Chaos Spawn. They aren't unbreakable, in fact they have that classic troll, very low leadership, but come with some armor and armor piercing damage, making them better versus heavily armored targets on the front lines. I'd still use them pretty much the same as I use most monsters like this. Once infantry clashes, send them in on your side of the fight so they can provide extra damage whilst being protected from too much damage focus. In typical troll fashion they have awful leadership, so pull them out if they start to get worried, and have them regen until they feel better and send them back in. They also reduce the defense of all nearby enemy units, so even if they aren't actively fighting on the front lines, by being close they'll be making the job easier for everyone. And lastly, we have Toe Dragons. These are the new fattest unit on the roster with tons of HP and better stats than the Unclean one for everything but melee stats, which it drops just a tad. Great damage on the front lines versus anything with that weapon strength, but swarms of melee are the main target. Just be careful of ranged focus or surrounding in melee, as their low defense can spell a quick doom if you aren't careful. Also, make use of their magical missile ability whenever you can for some great single target damage. And lastly, we come to the Regiments of Renown. The Rotting Riders are Rot Knights and gain increased weapon strength and charge bonus, as well as the Blessing of the Fly Lord ability. The Angels of Decay are Death's Head Plague Drones and gain increased ammo and missile strength, and the Noxbringer is a Nurgle Soul Grinder. It says reduced missile strength, but it's more per barrage, but a slower fire rate, and it also gains the Cloud of Erosion imbued effect on melee and ranged attacks. And lastly, let's just sum up Tamurkhan in a few short sentences. Tamurkhan has the simplest mechanics of the 3 DLC lords, but they're still complex enough that they can take you a while to get the hang of. Once you get on a roll, recruiting all the different chieftains can quickly make your armies unstoppable, especially if you collect them all in one place. They bring a ton of variety to your battles and the roster, as well as offering some pretty powerful effects that feel in line with their origins. The units hit bolster the roster in all the right ways, bringing more options to the thinner areas of the faction, while still fitting with the Nurgle Maggot possessed Ogre Warlord theme. And that is everything there is to know on how to get started with Tamurkhan in Warhammer 3. Let me know what you think of the Lord, and if you have any questions in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 DLC content, then check out this video, all about the new Nurgle rework.